If y'all could know how overstimulated I get when I record videos, you would be surprised because I just had to rip off another shirt I was wearing because I'm like, if I even keep recording in this shirt, you're going to see an ugly side of me, the fleshy side, and you don't want to see that. All right. Hey guys, what's up? What's going on? So today's video, we're going to be talking about the resistance that sometimes we'll face when we're seeking to grow or we're seeking to reach a goal. And with a lot, one of the things that we don't realize is that this resistance should be expected and that we should embrace this resistance actually. So we're going to discuss the resistance, and then we're going to talk about how we can reshape our thoughts to want to embrace it and then to not flee from it. And if you're new here, what's up? My name is Christian. I make content about mental health and social issues, all from a biblical perspective, a lot of it from my own experience, so that we can all heal, grow, and make an impact on the world as Christ intended. So, like I said in the beginning of this video, resistance is a guaranteed and necessary step when we're seeking to grow or we're seeking to obtain some sort of goal. And to illustrate that, we're going to head into 2 Corinthians chapter 4. So starting at verse 16, it reads, "So we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal." The things that are unseen when we're seeking to grow, that's what we're trying to obtain, right? Because we say, I don't know, for example, when I was struggling with depression and I was like working, it took so much work for me to be able to get to that point where I wasn't struggling so much. But I was working to something I could not see. I was working for something I could not even feel, and sometimes I couldn't even imagine. But that process that I went through to overcome depression, that was necessary for me to get to the other side. So likewise, with whatever goal you have or way you're trying to grow, that pain, that suffering, if you will, is necessary. It's light momentary affliction that's preparing you for that thing. In the same way, how we experience suffering in this life, and that suffering isn't just wasted, it's preparing us for the weight of eternal glory. And I honestly feel like this is a reason why a lot of us will turn back eventually when we're seeking to go to something, or we give up so easily, we give up so quick, because we face that resistance and we freak out, okay, because we don't know that resistance is necessary and that resistance is part of the whole process. And a verse I really do like that talks about this is 1 Peter 4, verses 12 to 13, where it says, "Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you, but rejoice insofar as you share Christ's sufferings, that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed." And honestly speaking, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this topic is because I noticed with myself, I almost gave up because I didn't know that there's resistance. And I know in the general, in the mental health niche, there is a lot of content that's floating around that says, like, oh, mental health is, taking a nice bubble bath. That's taking care of your mind. Or, overcoming certain things, that means some journaling or, staring at a sunset. And sure, there's a time and place for those things, but truly the growth really happens in that fire. The growth really happens is when you're struggling and then you don't know if you can go any further, because that means you've reached the end of yourself and now you're going to something greater. You reach the end of what you're used to and now you're entering into new territory, better territory, if you will, the land flowing with milk and honey. And I really think the parable of the sower really illustrates this idea really well, that there's a process when it comes to growth. So we're going to head into Matthew chapter 13. So starting at verse 5, it says, "Other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away." So notice how it said it immediately sprang up, right? So that kind of represents the first stage of when we're seeking to grow, when we're seeking to change something in our lives. So for example, if you're seeking to learn a new language like I have, you originally you go into it, you're excited, you start looking things up, you download Duolingo, whatever, and you're like, okay, I want to learn this language, and you're excited about it. That's the original initial being sprung up. There's joy, there's excitement, because it's something new. There's novelty associated with it. Maybe you're even imagining the new life that you would potentially have with this thing or this new growth or whatever the thing is. But like we said, there will be resistance of some kind because you are changing your mind. You're renewing your mind, as Romans 12:1 says. And that process is not easy. That process is hard because you're going against yourself. You're going against everything that you know, everything that you're familiar with. This is kind of like the sun that came down to scorch the seed. What does this realistically look like? This maybe is doubt, right? A lot of doubt. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I should be doing this. This person said this, or I don't know, I'm the first one in my family to do this. Or maybe a lot of fear, thinking about, okay, what if I fail? I don't have a backup plan. Or, what if God doesn't pull through in this way? Or, what if I'd heard God's voice wrong? A lot of fear can be associated with this as well, this resistance. And honestly, it can even approach the point of desiring to go back. And something that really has checked me to keep going through this phase, now that I'm aware that anytime I want to grow and change, that this will indeed happen, is saying I don't want to be like the Israelites. I don't want to be crying out to God to take me back to where he brought me from. Because I recently, like last year or so, I found myself talking to God about how, this something I asked God for. I'm like, I don't, this is strange. This is weird. This things aren't steady how I'm used to, like money's weird, and, working is weird. Everything's just weird and unfamiliar. And God kind of brought it to my mind how I was acting like the Israelites. And that immediately clocked me because I don't want to be like that. Why should we be more resistant to what God is doing in our lives, to the new change that he's bringing about, than to going back to our old lives, going back to the thing that we cried out to him to deliver us from? And please hear me when I say this, that this resistance is completely normal. Anytime you grow, there's resistance. Think about even when you're at the gym, right? And you reach a certain weight and it's like starting to get heavier. There's going to be resistance because you're going from where you were to where you want to be to becoming stronger. And eventually that weight will no longer feel as heavy. In order to endure this resistance, in order to not be scorched like the plant in the parable of the sower, ask yourself, do you have depth? And so what does that depth look like? A relationship with God, a purpose, a reasoning as to why you're doing this thing. Sometimes we pick up things because we see other people doing it and we feel like we should be doing it too, or we feel like we're behind. But if that is your reasoning, if your reasoning is rooted in other people, that's no depth and it will be burnt up and scorched. However, if your reasoning is built and rooted in something that can glorify God, your reasoning is something that can serve and help others, something bigger than yourself, something outside of yourself, then the likelihood of you obtaining that thing, the likelihood of you resisting and going through that fire is a lot higher. And I know I speak from things like, deeper things like maybe overcoming depression or a certain trauma, but really any kind of goal. Like for me, like learning a language, like there are multiple times where I feel like, I speak that language, I'm fine. And then I approach a new level and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And then it's like, it's a cycle, but understanding that that's normal, that resistance is normal, and that the reason I want to learn a language so I can preach the gospel better in a different language, or I can communicate with people, or I can go to a different country and communicate with, people from my culture. That deep reasoning is what helps me to keep going through the resistance. All right, so the third and last stage is the arrival. You finally made it, right? So this is why we need to resist. This is why we need to persevere through the resistance, rather, because there will come a point where you do arrive. There will come a point where you get better at that skill. There will come a point where you attain that goal, where you finally overcome that thing, where you finally overcome that sin. So if you're in the middle of this resistance, if you feel like you want to turn back and just give up, and whatever that thing is, whether it's something that that may seem relatively small, like obtaining, like learning a language or something like that, like I was doing, or maybe it's something like bigger, like like overcoming depression or a certain trauma or things like that, I really want to encourage you with this verse in Galatians 6:9, where it says, "And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up." Resistance is normal, right? I know you feel like, you may look at other people and be like, I don't understand, they did it. And everyone will go through resistance when you're trying to obtain something. It's part of the process. It's normal. It's necessary even, right? Do not give up. Keep going, persevere, lean into Christ, right? We're not in this alone, whatever the thing is. And I've learned that it's not just like the big things like depression and trauma and things like that, that we need Christ for. We need Christ for even the smallest of things, from, maybe some like going to the gym or maybe learning a skill. Jesus cares about all of our lives, right? About every part of our lives. So we need to involve him in every part of our lives. You may go through this process a few times in whatever this thing is you're trying to achieve. I know with me and depression, I've had, times where I'm like, I got better and then I feel like I got worse. But each time I realized I came back stronger, and each time I realized that I've learned more now, to the point if I experience depression right now, it doesn't affect me the same way it did a few years ago. Having this knowledge and applying this knowledge is what helps us to not fold, to not bend the knee to whatever our circumstances are, and not bend the knee to whatever pain or resistance we may feel when we're trying to overcome something or we're trying to achieve something. I really do hope and pray that this video was a blessing to you. I'll meet you down below in the comments. Let me know what you think about this video, how this video has helped you in any way. And of course, be sure to like this video if it was a blessing to you, and subscribe for more content like this. And remember, above all that, you got this because God's got you. Peace out.